I'm so glad that you're joining us this week. We've got Dragonblade authors Chantry, Dawes, and Elizabeth Rose with us. Ladies, thank you so much for taking time to join us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So we have a super busy spring and summer at Dragonblade. We have a bunch of releases this month. Chantry, your book came out this week, and it's Thoroughly Captivated.
Thoroughly Captivated. It comes out tomorrow, actually. Yeah, and it is.
We're airing.
It's the third book in the Albee Park series of the Darley family. Should I go into what it's about?
Yes, please. And tell us about the hero, especially.
Okay. The hero is a man named War, W-A-R.
Oh, like as in what?
As in war. But his full name is Warwick. And
cool.
he's a bear. He's become a baron, even though he did not want to be. He served in war in the battles all throughout the Regency period going on in England. And he came home. Most of his family is dead. So he is the reluctant baron now of his home, which is an old castle. It's fallen into ruins. It's called Greystone, which I thought was a really cool name. And he's been injured in the war, and he has just such a sense of great guilt that he could not save all his men. And the ones that he could, he ended up bringing them home to the castle and giving them time to heal and how to use their body in its damaged form, and just gave them a restart on life and a purpose. And in doing that, he realized there was so many horses that he also had to save. And most of the horses did not come back. It was too costly to ship them. So he did bring some back. And he realizes he can help the men and help them learn to use their bodies again and feel important and needed in society, but he can't help the horses. So he needs someone who is basically a veterinarian back in those days. And they were called animal practitioners. So by a lot of little instances, he ends up, Lula Darley, who we met in the other books, comes to his door. And he doesn't want her. And he says, you're just a girl with a piece of paper. You don't have any real degrees. And she kind of forces her way into it, but there's a snowstorm. So he says, you can stay only until after the snowstorm, and then I am taking you home, because this is not in contravention. It's not what is, what's the word I want to use? It's not what is done back in those days. But she herself is also hiding because she has some scars physical on her body where she was attacked in Hyde Park, and that was in the second book. So it's kind of a follow-up with what's happening to her. She's terrified of men. She faints at the sight of men. She faints at the very first meeting with War. And he's like, I don't want her here. This is a castle full of men. If she's going to faint at the sight of all these men, it's never going to work. So she's hiding in the barn and trying to help the horses. And little by little, the men want her help as well with their injuries. So it really is, to me, a beautiful story of both of these people coming to grips with their injuries and their past problems and helping each other and helping these men that are also injured and bringing this castle back to life.
And redemption in all different directions for the greater good.
And of course we have some bad guys that are just at the castle using it because they have nowhere to go after the war, and they have their own little actions in the story where they cause problem and disruption. But in the end, it's I think the ending is just epic. So I won't spoil that.
Yay!
But it's beautiful.
Although you have force proximity too, so it's like
yeah. But it just, my oldest son served in Iraq, and a lot of his friends grew up on my farm, and a lot of them also, went into service in the military, and seeing my boys come home, and I call them all my boys, and they never come home as themselves. Whether they make it home or not, they're not themselves. And it's just, how do they reintegrate into society mentally, as well as with their physical disabilities? And not, putting too much on my son, but he had some pretty severe injuries. And one of the things that they had him do, which is amazing, is he went to a camp after he came out, and they gave him a guitar, and he had to learn to play the guitar to use his fingers again. So it made me think, wow, think of all the injured men back in those days, because England was involved in so many wars, and the amount of horses that were used. In London alone, in the Regency times, there was at times over 50,000 horses.
Oh my goodness, I would have had no idea that it was that.
So imagine how many were over in the wars and what happens to them. So that was
them being too expensive to bring, it being too expensive to bring them back too, the logistics that you just don't consider.
So that was my research on the story, which led to Lula and War's story.
Oh, I love that. I love dual damage characters.
And it was really fun because, a lot of us have anxieties and, we have panic attacks. So to have this one female character, the heroine, having panic attacks, and she actually passes out. And here's all these men. Oh no, she's gonna pass out again, and they have to help her too. So
and you don't want to. You want to be able to muscle your way through, but there's some things you just can't muscle your way through.
Right.
Oh, I love that. What a lovely setup. That's so strong. It's so powerful.
Good. Thank you. I hope people like it. I hope they like it.
Awesome. And Elizabeth, your book is Highland Flame.
Yes.
And it's part of the Highland Outcast series. Is that right? The second book?
It's book 2 in my Highland Outcast series. And I'm telling you about this one. I'm going to start it out with my opening line, which I totally love. And the line is, her husband was dead and she felt nothing but relief. Her only regret being that she was the one who killed him. That doesn't grab your attention. What does, right?
Absolutely.
And so anyway, I can get back to her story in a minute, but Cam McKeith is one of my of the McKeith clan, the Highland Warriors. There was 4 friends who went from being heroes to outcasts in a matter of a couple blinks of an eye, because of his crazy the Laird's grandfather is just crazy, and he owns a tavern, and so they have to redeem themselves now to get back into the clan. So each book is about one of them redeeming themselves to get back. This one happens to be about Cam McKeith, who is kind of he likes the ladies just a little bit too much. It's kind of the whole thing is kind of like a play on the 7 deadly sins too. So
that's wonderful,
one, right? And anyway, so what his thing is that he's got to. Okay, so she's a widow now. This is Yvain, and she's actually the Chandler's widow. The Chandler was her husband. She was abused, okay, and she's also pregnant, and so she's killed him in self-defense, and she's with the candlestick holder over his head. All right, so now she's scared because of the fact that women back then, they didn't have any rights. They they were treated worse than dogs. So if they find out that she killed her husband, she's going to be killed, and she needs to protect her baby. So she has 2 brothers. One is the barkeeper across the street who finds out the predicament she's in and tries to help her. And the other one is a monk who's in England. And so now she's gone to the castle for help to get escorted by a Highlander to the monastery. That's where she's going to be hiding out. Okay. Nobody knows except for her brother what's happened. And Cam thinks that he thinks she's going there to take her vows, and he's very attracted to her. And she realizes this not too far into the story, and she says, "Fine, we're going to let him just think that. Then he'll leave me alone." So that is the basis of the story, and she's going there she's going to make her candles in the monastery now. And each of my books, I take something that that was a skill back then in the medieval times that just totally interested me. Like in Highland Soul, in the first one, you learn about shoes. It was the cordwainers. And how they did it. This is all about candles, and you'll learn how to make candles. And it was just a lot of fun doing the research and seeing what they did. And so there's a lot of humor in these books too. I can't help it. I just, I write humor. Life is too serious. We need to laugh more.
Oh, you have a buddy there with you.
Yeah, this is the puppy you've met before, who is no longer that small. He's growing.
So Elizabeth, I remember you talking about the last time about the cordwainer's daughter, and I had to look that up because I didn't know what a cordwainer was.
Right.
But I love the idea of you almost creating the picture of this little village, like the things that had to go into life.
Right.
I think one of the beautiful parts about reading historical romance, and I'm going to apologize for the beeping up of the trucks out the window. But one of the things I love about historical romance is learning about periods and learning things that I don't know, and Chantry, we've talked about the horses before and their part in society. Is there anything that you guys have found while you're researching your books, anything that particularly caught you that you didn't know about until you started researching?
I can say one thing that caught me is I was wondering how they transported all the horses to the various countries where they were fighting if they did not have docks available. They fitted out ships with lower berth ramps, and the horses had to jump in and swim. And to get them back on,
jump in and swim.
Yeah, and to get them back on, they got as close as they could. They had to swim out, and then they had to get them up that ramp. And I thought, oh my gosh. Or they had to winch them. But if they winched them up onto the ship, they lost a lot of horses, which you can imagine. And I was like, oh my gosh. Because if you're trying to sneak into a country to attack it, you can't go to a dock. You have to kind of be in the dead of night, and just like our Marines, have the little boats to shore. So what do you do with the horses? That's what they did.
So
it's amazing.
I know we were to train soldiers and that we would have trained men back then. Was there training that went into horses before they became war horses?
No, actually, that's the other thing I found out. So in medieval times, yes, they trained them. In Regency times, they did not. And it was up to the colonel of each of the dragoons, battalions or regiments, who would go and spend his money and procure horses. And they just got any horses they could. They were going to all be casualties anyway. So yeah, it was pretty bad. It was awful.
Oh my goodness. Elizabeth, was there something that you came across when you were researching?
Well, I just loved researching about the town life. And that's kind of like what I was trying to focus on, because most of the time we know what goes on at the castle. We see that all the time, but it's like, well, what happens to the people in town and how they live and everything, and just researching even like with the candles. And it was, part I already knew was like, they had the beeswax candles, or they had the ones made out of tallow. Not only the people who were nobles or like the church could afford these beeswax candles, which a lot of times were scented because very expensive. But they make them out of tallow, which is animal fat. And a lot of times you burn that. And then, certain kinds of animal fat, you can make it out of it. And certain kinds you couldn't, because, it would really stink too.
Oh.
And so that was really interesting. And just how they dipped the candles and made the candles. And then how these merchants, they had unions, or not unions, they had guilds. It's like a union. They had guilds back then. And there was actual rules, like we talked about last time with the shoes. There was the cordwainers were allowed to use the new leather and make new shoes, where the cobblers could only use old leather and only repair shoes. They had rules like this.
Wow.
And the guilds would go around and they would charge, you had to pay your dues, and they would check up on you, make sure you're doing your job right and you were sticking, and it can only sell to certain people and everything. And women back then, really, it was really tough. The times did start changing, but like if you were like with my heroine, Yvain, she's the wife of a cordwainer. So if he would die, she could take over his business. But for a woman to just have a business on her own, it was kind of unheard of. But like you can take it over if your husband would die. Of course, not to kill him, but and
hard to wish to be a widow.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. The whole thing about it, just with the monasteries, because you think a lot of times too, the nuns were in the convents and the nunneries, and only the males and the monks were in the monasteries. Well, that's not true. The monasteries held both monks and nuns, and there was an abbot and the abbess, and so they were mixed. It's like a co-ed school kind of.
Wow.
Which that's something I really didn't know until you start, researching it. And then the whole thing, I won't even get into that right now, but the whole thing with the monasteries and all that, they have 7 different prayer sessions of the day that they get up and you have to pray, and that was really interesting too. So I go through a lot of that in my book. Anyone that reads it's going to come out with a lot of knowledge of the medieval time. That's for sure.
I love it.
So
I'm sorry, I'm muted because there's shooting rocks behind me. That is so cool, though. And I loved when I was reading the blurb for Highland Flame, and he was talking about how he started to have feelings for this nun. It's like what it would be like to have different social positions and to have your feelings challenge those social positions. I think that a lot of time that's something that we use as a setup in books.
And the thing with the, I try not to get into too much with the whole religion thing because it's so controversial. But back then, I mean, nuns and priests weren't as good as you thought they were. Put it that way. They had flings and they had children and things like that. And they were nuns and priests, and they shouldn't have. But
they had children.
Yeah, sometimes we try to put it in the book.
Wow.
But they, not like, on the sly, but yeah, they're it was a lot different back then. Of course, who knows what it's like nowadays too, I suppose. Yeah. But
so did the children live in the monasteries or did they get moved out?
I'm sorry?
Did the children live in the monastery too, or did they get kind of shuttled off to families outside?
No, I don't think that was allowed. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
My book kind of deals with that because I don't want to give away too much, but my hero finds out that he has a child, and I don't want to say too much more. But anyway, he's not ready to be a father yet. Let's just put it that way. And I know that someone.
I love the title though, Highland Flame.
Yeah, because of the candles. Yeah,
because
and I know
candles
had the ARCs are out, and one of my review teams said, "Oh, she goes, I shed a lot of tears." Yeah, they cry, but then they laugh too, so it makes up for it.
Good.
I'm thinking, wait, what did I write? What part was she crying about? But I cry a lot of times when I'm writing my books too. So, and that's good. That's good. If it evokes emotion, that's what you want. So
it is good. It is good. As long as you have the tissues nearby, I think it's very good. Yeah. So, have you tried your hand at making candles yourself?
No, I haven't yet, but I want to. I mean, after I've done all this research, I'm like, oh, I want to try making a pair of medieval shoes. I want to try making candles. And like for one of my books, not for this series, but it was for the title was Highland Spring. It was a while ago, and they made bows and arrows, and I researched that, and I'm like, wow, that looks like a lot of work, but it looks like a lot of fun. I would love to try it. So one of these days we'll see, but it'd be fun.
That's great.
And Chantry, I know you ride and have horses on your farm.
I do, yeah, I do. I've never tried making candles. I've always wanted to, but I make soap. I make my own soap. So it's interesting to me that you were saying how some of the tallow they couldn't use because I think it all smelled, but some of that, I guess isn't that animal fat? Is that animal fat?
It is. And you know what? I honestly can't remember which one it was right now, but if you read the book, you'll find out because I put it in there. It was kind of like they don't use it from pigs or something. I don't remember which one it was. Honestly, I forgot already. But the candle makers back then, the chandlers, they did make soap as well. Yeah. Because a lot of times that was made out of tallow, which I never understood that. You're going to take animal fat and rub it on you to get clean.
Well, there has to be some sort of oil added to the lye. So they would use anything that was a source of fat. But I think that's fascinating that not all animal fat is usable. But that makes sense. Yeah. Gosh.
I wish I could remember which one it was now, but yeah, it's in the book. Believe me.
Well, we'll have to read it.
Yeah, I'll have to read it too.
So I know it's getting warmer, and we talked a little bit about making, a little bit about candle making. You both told me ahead of time that you're gardeners, and Elizabeth, I know your spring is probably a little bit past where we are. Chantry, you're in the south too, aren't you?
Yeah, yes, I
So
am. I am.
the first week it's felt like it's really here for good, like spring and
Yeah,
summer is here. Is there
we
anything that's coming up that you're particularly excited about?
No, not so much flowers this year. We're putting in more vegetables and stuff. The potatoes are already coming up, which is interesting. I do a lot of herbs though. So there'll be more corn this year and sweet potatoes. Oh, we figured out how to do sweet potatoes and they are amazing.
I
So much
love
better
growing
than the
sweet potatoes.
store.
Mhm. Well, there's something about potatoes in general. When you get them right from the garden, the starch doesn't have a chance to turn to sugar. It's just the texture is different. It's everything about it is
Yeah,
it's
wonderful.
wonderful.
It's
So,
wonderful.
Elizabeth, do you vegetable garden or do you flower
I
garden?
used to. We used to. I had collard greens that were as big as me at one time because we used horse manure, But I haven't done a vegetable garden in a long time now because I have a small yard, so I mainly do flowers and my herbs. But our spring we've just started. We don't I have a couple crocuses. I mean, some people have daffodils, but I got nothing growing yet. It's too early, windy
Yeah.
here, and but I like my herb garden, and my herbs tend to like the thyme. I'll use the thyme all winter long, and even the parsley, you can go under the snow and dig it out and it's still there and it's still growing. I've got rosemary, sage.
Yep.
Like the song, rosemary, sage, parsley, and thyme. Comfrey. What else do I have? Apple mint, which is really good for tea. Love that. Rosemary, of course. That one I dig up and bring in over the winter because that won't last. Lavender, which I want to do more with that. Like I'm sure, making soaps.
Yeah, I do a lot of lavender soaps and the lavender buds on it.
I want to get into that more someday. But I love the herbs and I make teas out of them and we eat them, on barbecues and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
So do you have any plans to use any of that kind of knowledge in your upcoming books? I know you've got another one coming out, another one of the Highlands Outcasts coming out in June.
Yeah, that one we'll be thatching roofs on that one.
Oh, I love thatching.
Which
Thatchers are my favorite.
Really fascinating. No real herbs in these yet. I plan on having later on having a whole herbal series, an herb garden series, but not for this one. So the next one we're thatching roofs, and then the last one, my Highlander goes and Highland Silver. He's after a silver cup that has been stolen, and he goes and I bring a character in from another book. I really wanted him to do like silversmithing or something, but there's no way that you could learn it. You can't learn it that fast. I couldn't really put that in there and make it be believable that my hero is going to learn this in a matter of a week or two, or something like that. It would never happen. So that kind of go around that a little bit. But yeah, it's a lot of fascinating information going on. So
cool. So Chantry, what's coming up next in your series?
We have The Last Sister, Birdie Darley. Her story is going to be really fun. Like you, I like to add humor. The recurring character throughout these books is their great aunt Eggie, who is almost like a fairy godmother, and she's a mischievous old Scottish woman. And so Aunt Eggie is going to help Birdie find her happily ever after, because Birdie thinks she loves somebody, and Aunt Eggie doesn't think that's the right one for her. So in this story, now with Lula and War, you're going to meet a couple of the next heroes that will get their story. Cool. Good or bad. They might be good people and they might end up being bad people. So I'm writing her story now, and I am doing a lot of chuckling. So it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one. Not so much, maybe not so much horses in this one.
I think it's funny she says good or bad, because I had one series where I had the villain. It was in my Secrets of the Heart series, and I liked him so much I made him the hero of book 4. That was book 4. Book 4, he's back and he's the hero. He was the villain in book 4.
I love a deep character arc. It's like if you show me a man who can grow the whole way through, that's there's a lot to love there.
Exactly.
And he was an assassin too, so that was a good trick.
Or maybe they've just been misunderstood and they were good all along, but we're trying to beat that bad reputation.
The reason why they do things that makes the difference. So
yeah. So,
Unless you're Thanos, and then it's just bad, period. So.
yeah. So Birdie is going to be pulled aside by Queen Charlotte to do some little eavesdropping and a little bit of spying for the Queen
Oh,
to
that sounds like
Love
find
it.
out if that guy is good or bad.
that sounds like
So,
so much fun.
yeah.
So ladies, we just have a couple minutes left. Can we talk a little bit about how you work? Do you find yourself, do you sit down in the morning and write the whole way through? Do you need to give yourself breaks? Do you write and do the other business of authoring during the course of the day, or do you are you more intensive when you're writing?
My mornings are reading over what I wrote the day before and editing, adding to it. And then the afternoon I have lunch, and then the afternoon I'm writing all afternoon. And usually I have a writing lesson to give, which is my mental break. So I could go out and teach somebody for an hour, and then I come back in and I write some more. But yeah, when I need, and quite often I just have to get up from the table and just walk around, and my mind is constantly running scenes and conversations, and someone might be talking to me and I'm like, what? Because, I'm back in the 1800s. So yeah, I have to get out a lot, but that break to just go outside and breathe and do something totally different and then come back and see what I wrote with brand new eyes really helps me.
What about you, Elizabeth?
Well, I have a really kind of a weird way of doing it, I suppose. I'm kind of an all or nothing kind of person, and I'm pretty much a slave driver. So I'm not one of these authors that say, "Oh, I wrote 1,000 words today, and that's it." No, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'll sit down and crank out normally 10,000 words a day is what I do. But I'll write 8-9 hours. Have a lunch break or something to get right back to it. But I push myself because I feel that when I get away from the story too much, then kind of like what Chantry was saying, it's like you have to go back and reread what you wrote. And every time that happens to me, if I have to go back and reread and start, and then you're going to fuss with it. You're going to edit it. You can't go forward when you're going backward. So I get it all down on the page first. I get the whole story out first, and that's what I call my first draft. And then I go back and I start fixing things up, and and sometimes like I need a name for the secondary character. I don't even want to take the time to do it. I'll put an X there and I'll go back later and I'll fill it in. If it's something that doesn't really matter that much. But I'm a very fast writer, and like I'll write a book in 2 weeks, a month is normally how long it takes me to write a book. But that's all I do. I'm not going to be cooking. I'm not going to be cleaning the house. You're not going to see anything like that. I write the story and I get it out, and then I just do something else. That's just the way I work.
So you can do an 80,000 word or plus in a month?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know. The most I've ever written in a day was 20,000 words.
Oh my goodness.
Haven't done that in a long time though. But normally, my normal is like 6,000 to 10,000 words a day. But that's
me too.
I get you just get in the mode, and if you're only writing a 60,000, 70,000 word book, then you should have your first draft in a week. Why shouldn't you? If you're really focused, if you're not without distractions, I should say. Yeah. And with life, we all have distractions. Things happen, things take you away. Oh, and a lot of times I'm writing and I'm just like, hey guys, we have no food in the house, but let's just go out and get something really quick because I'm not taking time to go to the grocery store right now. So I'm done with the book. I'm done with the book. We can eat again.
Yeah, I've been known to cancel a lesson or to say, go out and just do a practice ride. I can't stop. I really can't stop. And they understand. So
if you keep going, you don't get out of the story. You got the mode, and
you need the flow. You need the flow and the timeline and. Yeah.
My characters write the book. I let them do it. So it's kind of like you're just taking dictation, like you're channeling your characters, But it's easier. It's so much easier to keep in the story than to get out of it. Oh, and if I have to stop for a day, I have elderly parents. If I have to stop and take them to the doctor and I don't get any writing and then come back, that really slows me down. Then you have to go back and you have to reread the last couple chapters to remember what you wrote and where you're at in the book.
Yeah.
Somebody used to describe it as having to lift the rock at the same part off the ground every day. So instead of being able to launch it into space, you just revisiting the same path over and over and over again. It takes the same amount of energy to lift the rock.
That's like I've been writing for a long time. I mean, the first book, I mean, my first book was published like in 2000. I think I started writing romance in
2000 doesn't
1996.
feel that long ago until you start
It
counting
doesn't,
years.
I
And
know,
it's like, oh
yeah.
man.
But the thing is, it's just like at first I could not get past chapter 3 of the book because I kept going back and rereading it every day and revising it. And like I said, you can't go forward if you're moving backwards. So that's my thing, is get it all out. It's not going to be perfect, but that's your first draft. And then you have something to work with, and it's just so much easier and stuff flows a lot faster that way. But that's the way I work. It's not the way everyone works. And I don't do it.
Interesting.
I don't do one of these outlines that people do. I'm a pantser. So, you know, I don't do outlines. It's just like, I don't even know what I'm writing until I start writing. The truth.
It's really interesting to me to hear how everybody's process is and how different it is. And I think the thing as young writers, if there are any young writers listening, I think one of the most important things is to find what your process is, you know,
Right.
and
what works for you.
and
Everyone
then
is
be
different.
consistent with that, you know, because I listen to Emily Murdoch talk and she writes 30,000 word outlines and I'm thinking, that's genius. I should try that. That's fantastic. But I would be so bored because I get to the 80% point and I'm like, I know what happens. Now I don't have to finish.
No.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
think everybody has to figure out what their process is and
not
then
me.
hold on to your, hold on to what your way of doing things is.
Exactly.
Because I also like the idea of revisiting, you know, just the previous day's work to be able to stay in line, you know, so that you can
At least the
keep
last
track of your
chapter. Then it
people.
doesn't take too long. You just read the last chapter.
Yeah. I do outlines. I think I have to have an outline, but it's super brief. I mean, it's like one page and it's just, you know, this scene. But the biggest purpose for my outline is to get down character, personalities, and traits and make sure I have a very clear, definitive character.
Because then motivation is so much easier. If you know who they are, you know why they do the things they do.
And why they speak the way they do, or whatever their little, you know, idiosyncrasies are, whether he's rubbing his chin all the time or she's fussing with a curl.
It's a good thing to do. And
it makes them real, I think.
Enough.
Yeah. You meet people, like, I shouldn't say this. I've got a student right now and she's probably like 68 years old. So she's just close to my age. And she just burps randomly. And she's not even aware of it. And I thought, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that in one of my characters. Because it's just the funniest thing. It's not like a man's roaring burp. She just does a little you know, and I'm always like, oh, and she's like, what? And I'm like, oh, nothing. She's not even aware she's doing it. And it's what makes people unique. And I like to bring those kind of things into my characters so they become
and make them
real.
feel real. And that way we're more attached to them.
Yeah. You know, for my characters too, a lot of times I know what she's saying is like, you should know what your characterization is before you start. And that's a good thing to do. I can't do it. I'm not disciplined enough. But if I get stuck, like I'll be in the shower or I'll be out walking the dog and all of a sudden this character comes into my head. Like I remember this one time I was a little bit stuck with one of my heroines and I went around the block with the dog. By the time I come back, I'm like, oh my gosh, her backstory is just something else because I got it when I was walking. It just came through.
Yeah.
Or they yank you back and go, we wouldn't go in that direction. We want to go this way. And
but honestly, that's what happens to me when I'm writing a book. Sometimes I'll get to the end of the chapter. I have no idea what's going to happen next and how they're going to get out of this. I don't. I just write it and then we find out.
I love that.
Well, ladies, this was a delight. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. This was so much fun, and I apologize for the noise in the background.
There wasn't much.
There wasn't. It's fine.
I tried to time things in between gravel dumps. So
yes.
It wasn't too bad. Thanks so much again. I'll pop the links to both of the books in the comments in the chat so you can pick up your copies if you haven't gotten them already. You want to get your Dragonblade books pre-order period or release because that is when they are the very best price and they are always a great deal and always a great read. So we will see you back here the same time next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.